All right. So I think some other folks might be joining, but I want to make sure we have enough time to cover all the different things we want to talk about today with our very awesome guest speakers. So we're going to get started. Let me just get through our slides. Welcome, everyone. I'm seeing some familiar as well as new names in the chat group, which is really exciting. So welcome to everyone here, whether you're new to Voice of Witness or an old friend. Happy you're here. Just some norms as we get started. This webinar is being recorded right now, so everyone who's registered will receive a link to the video and a follow-up email shortly after the webinar is finished. If you require automated captions, they are available in the toolbar at the bottom of the Zoom window. If you have any trouble or need any support accessing that, feel free to just directly message myself or the box that says Voice of Witness, and we can provide some tech support for you. As some people have already started doing, which is great, we encourage folks to use the chat box for introductions. You can share your name, pronouns, where you're based, acknowledging whose Indigenous land you're on, orgs you work with, projects, and anything else you'd like to share. And we really do encourage you to use the chat box throughout the workshop or the session today, to share your thoughts and feelings and reflections as we're having a conversation. You can also put questions in the chat box. Myself and my VOW colleagues will be looking out for those questions, and we'll hold these and keep an eye on them and share them during the Q&A section that's at the end of the session. So you will have a chance to ask questions of our speakers yourself. So feel free to put those questions in the chat and we'll follow up on them. Just as an introduction, since again, there seems to be some new folks here, which is awesome. This is a session hosted by Voice of Witness, also known as VOW from our initials. So Voice of Witness is an oral history nonprofit that was founded about 15 years ago in San Francisco, though we're all virtual now and based across the country. And the mission of VOW is to utilize oral history and first-person narrative to advance human rights. We really believe in advancing human rights and addressing social justice issues by amplifying the voices of people who are directly impacted and fighting against injustice. So we really believe in listening to people. We call them our narrators, the people who share their stories with us. We really believe in listening to the people who have that lived experience and expertise, really flipping the script of what you normally might see in mainstream media and thinking of our narrators as the experts and listening to their stories in a really nuanced, three-dimensional way in order to address human rights issues. So VOW has a number of different programs that we implement. One is our book program, an editorial program, where we've published over 20 books in our book series right now, all focused on a different social justice issue, all including oral histories, life histories from people impacted by those issues on a number of themes, including migration, displacement, the climate crisis, and the carceral system, and more issues. We also have an education program where we bring our books, our storytelling resources, our oral history skills. We bring them to the classroom and work with students of a whole range of ages so they can learn about these issues and become oral historians themselves. We also have a community partnerships program where we work directly with a variety of nonprofits and grassroots organizations so we can make that link between storytelling and advocacy for social change. If you're interested, we also provide a number of different services, so we're always looking forward to working with new people. And so for some people who are learning about oral history, for us at Voice of Witness, we really see oral history as a powerful tool that has so many different applications and benefits. You know, there's a traditional way of thinking about oral history as a way to approach storytelling and narrative storytelling in a very ethical way, a way that centers narrators and really emphasizes their agency. We believe storytelling in oral history is a way to build community, to provide a space for healing and connection. As we already mentioned, we think it's a great place for people to learn, for students of all ages and backgrounds to learn in a very deep and powerful way. It's an opportunity to advocate for change and to change the narratives that persist in our society and really focus on the people who have that lived experience and people who rarely ever get to have the mic. So oral history has so many different ways that it can impact social change work. And so for us at Voice of Witness, in addition to the programs I mentioned, we also offer a variety of custom trainings and different project support. So if you out there are doing your own oral history project or have an interest in starting a project, please reach out to us. You can reach out via our website or our email addresses, which we'll share at the end of the session. So please reach out to us. We love to chat and hear what you're working on. Um, so now I'm really excited to introduce our speakers for today. And I'm realizing I didn't introduce myself. I'm Ella Banerjee. I'm use she, her pronouns, and I'm the community partnership manager here at Voice of Witness. But I'm here just to get us started, and I'm really excited to pass it on to our two amazing speakers today. The first person I'll introduce is my awesome colleague, Fanny Garcia. Fanny is the editorial program manager at Voice of Witness, and she's an independent oral historian working with immigration narratives. When not collaborating on and marking up manuscripts or teaching and scouting projects and partnerships, Fanny's tending to her array of indoor plants. Fanny, do you want to just say hello and share where you're calling from?
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. And I am based in New York City, Lenapehoking, and happy and excited to be in conversation with Mi'Jan today. And I will introduce Mi'Jan. Mi'Jan Celie Tho-Biaz is a 2019 Kennedy Center citizen artist who moves between realms of oral history, art, ritual, and civic engagement. She is a 2024 National Council on Public History honoree for her oral history and social practice public artwork with Policy Link, an inaugural New America Us at 250 Fellow, as well as a 2023-2024 Andrew Mellon Foundation Fellow, and ongoing Octavia E. Butler Scholar at the Huntington Library. Mi'Jan, I am so excited to be in conversation with you today. And I feel like it's a grown-up moment for me because I used to learn from you when I was working with Groundswell Oral History for Social Change, an organization that's now defunct, but which was foundational to my work with social justice and oral history. And at one point, Groundswell fostered the work and ideas of a network of oral historians and memory workers using stories to contribute to social justice projects and movements. And I'm happy to continue the conversations that we started at Groundswell now that I'm with Voice of Witness. Back then, I was just struck by the hope, possibility, joy, and curiosity with which you spoke about oral history and its power. And fast forward a few years, and you still champion oral history as a tool for producing what you call lovingly liberated futures. Well, Mi'Jan, this energy and optimism you live by and work with is even more important now as we navigate a political landscape that is impacting budgets to humanities programs, funding for oral history projects and memory work, and is deliberately trying to erase fundamental historical narratives. And for this reason, in today's conversation, we want to hear about your experience with how oral history actively preserves truths that resist political erasure and political manipulation. We also want to hear about your work with Octavia E. Butler's archives, because that Octavia's work specifically informs us through speculative fiction about what is possible. And so, with that said, Mi'Jan, before I ask you my first question, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, that I'm at the Huntington. I'm in a month of research in Octavia's archives. I'm going to turn it around because before we started recording, I was like, look, it's it's this gorgeous, I don't know, what do you call these? Well, it's in a botanical garden, but what is the word?
Atrium?
No, not an atrium. Somebody help us in the chat. I don't remember what it's called. Like a arbori, la la
Yes,
la.
Arboretum.
That arboretum. And I'm like, of course she would have chosen just such a beautiful, yeah, private institution, being a futurist that does not rely on federal or state funding to ensure the protection of her manuscripts, personal journals, ephemera, around these world changing and spirit changing great public works that she gifted the world with. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm in Huntington, yeah, in a month of research. I get to do a month or two every year.
Amazing. I love it. Thank you for sharing the space that you're in, and I can't wait to dig in about what you've discovered in her archives. The first question I have for you, I feel is a little bit more personal. I was really curious for you to share how you realized that diving into the past through story was going to become such a central part of your life.
But so that's the thing, like it is and it isn't. I am timeline agnostic. So as I received training, as I began my practice, and then the evolution of my practice, I can't get with being with having a hierarchy around time. So like, for example, I have friends who are futurist. I didn't even know that was a thing, futurist, right? And I'm like, I don't, that doesn't resonate for me because I believe strongly in ancestors, and I work with so many communities around the world that have a very strong set of rituals and preservation connected to the past and people who have literally passed, right? They're deceased. And I'm like, so I can't get on board with your thing about only like being obsessed with the future. But I also, as an oral historian, felt very weird because I consistently have asked this question in one form or another for people to give me their Sankofa story. So what it is that they need to go back and retrieve in the past in order to move forward in right and good ways. And so I have one amazing, now she's gotten a lot of acclaim, one narrator whose name is Rose B. Simpson, from Santa Clara Pueblo in New Mexico. She's a ceramicist, and I think she calls herself a 3D poet. My point is, in the last oral history that we recorded, she said something like, Mi'Jan, you ask people to give you their prayers for the future. That's what that question means to me. That's how I interpret it. And I'm like, yes, from your lens, from other people's lenses, I'm literally just asking, like, what is it that you've had to return to so that you, your community, your practice, maybe even the whole world, but however you conceptualize it, you can move forward in right and good ways. So I'm timeline agnostic. I think about the present a lot, as much as I possibly can. I love doing sensory projects too, that are oral history embedded. However, you can't get me to, like, I'm just not going to give it up. I believe in the whole timeline. Yeah.
You mentioned Sankofa's story.
I'll type it in the chat. Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Yeah. So when I'm saying what I'm asking in that last question, actually, so I might as well just like pull the curtain back, since there are so many oral historians joining us today. I no longer just collect oral histories. I realized that, and it has nothing to do with the way that I was trained and everything to do with the communities who I've worked with and the projects that I've had to design collaboratively. It's disingenuous for me to sit asking narrators to basically pour into the recording, and for me not to vulnerably show up in this exchange of intimacy, memories, in this exchange of building trust, receiving trust, giving trust. I have to also share my stories. So before I hit record, and I think I started this, oh, I know exactly when, the moment. Alicia Wormsley, another, yeah, has some renown, African-American visual artist with a social practice, art practice. She's the one who had that billboard campaign, "There are Black people in the future." And I remember asking her, I don't remember what the question was in the interview, but I remember asking her a question, and I was like, oh, well, how I got to the question was da 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 da. And then I said my story about it. And she was like, oh, okay. And it sunk her right into what I was trying to elicit. And so then I said, I wonder what would happen if before the interview, and a way to sort of like prime people and some people get very nervous before an interview. It's like, let's just turn the nervous system down in terms of temperature, calm everything, cool everything down. I'm like, what would happen if before we either hit stage, if it's a public interview with an audience, or just before I hit record, if I say, hey, this was my intention with this project. Here's my story about this one question that I'm going to ask you. And then I'm going to hit record, or then we're going to go on stage. This has worked so very well. And it's not like a mechanism of manipulation. I want to be clear about that. It is, though, an explicit and implicit way of connection and building trust pretty quickly. So now what I do, and for the last 3 years, I tell people my Sankofa story. And I say, we're going to come to the end of the interview and I'm going to ask you, I want you to know ahead of time before we even venture off. And people are relieved, they're grateful that because it's such a very emotionally potent story for me, because I'm talking about my dad and my dad passed away almost 2 years to the day. Oh, I don't want to cry at the beginning of this, but it sinks people right in, right in. They are right with me. I'm right with them. And then we go on with the interview. So I talk about what I've had to go back in the past in order for me to understand myself as a person, as a creative, as a cultural worker, as a daughter of, intergenerational path in my family, what it has meant in terms of being a cultural worker versus an artist. And I do feel like it is versus an artist because it is lineage, ancestral work. Yeah, that's what I gotta say about that.
Thank you, Mi'Jan. And what is it, do you think, is the value that oral history provides, even though we are asking our narrators to be so vulnerable, and we're asking a lot of them?
Yeah.
Is it that oral history does have that importance or vitality and engagement?
I think, I thought about this question and for me, or let's just zoom out actually, and not all the way out like to a macro sense around art or creativity or cultural work, but just other people who interview. I've encountered so many journalists, even psychologists, like there's so many professionals who interview. And I'm like, what distinguishes us? Maybe that overlaps, but also, is distinct, very different. And I'm like, in terms of me, when I am at my highest, best, most integrated self, I know that the work that I do and the way that I do it is going to always build trust. And so if you're talking about, and I think about the work that I did last year in the embassies, I think about when I've been hired and commissioned in intertribal organizations and tribes, when I've come in and helped with design or taught design or structured the design or done some event programming, I'm like, man, if there's anything that is between communities that has experienced some trauma or contemporary riff or just interpersonal challenges, I'm like, do you know how important building trust is? And if you can do it effectively again and again and again, that's really important. And I don't know, when we look at other interviewers, journalists, that they are known for building trust. They have a different set of ethics, right? And they have a different goal and aims. I think about honor. How many times, even like the prolific people I've had a chance to interview, how many times they've said like, wow, you brought back memories and you've brought honor to me. I think about the people who just by mere inclusion, I think about elders where they're like, to say the same words, I feel honored. I feel honored to have been included in this project. I'm like, so honor, that's something, especially in 2025. But, I would say is a gift. It's a gift in our profession. And then I think in my case, because so talking through like the evolution of my practice, now I just really like, I don't like to use a bunch of words, and I definitely really feel so turned off when people use all the fancy words and the jargon and blah, 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 blah. So now if there was a way for people to understand what I mean by saying like, I just trade stories, that's what I would actually, if I'm known for something, it's really that. And I think that oral history has a very special place in the ecosystem of story and narrative work. I mean, now narrative work includes social media and branding and and I'm like, oral history could lend itself to that, but it's not defined. Like, that's not the thing that it is. That could be a tactic, that could be a strategy, that could be a technique. Yeah, so I'm like, oh man, one of the best, most resonant, happy things that I have in my wheelhouse is this ability to trade stories. It means that I don't have to leave any part of myself behind in order to be a practitioner, but it also means that like mutuality is embedded. There's not a hierarchy where I'm the person who knows the most and I'm going to parachute and jump in somewhere and then elicit these stories and then parachute out like, ick, gross. You know what I mean?
Thank you, Mi'Jan. Could you share an example of a cultural project that you worked on in which you felt this mutual trade of stories created a particular change in both the person interviewing or the narrator and the audience participating in that? And we've put up a photo that you wanted to share, so I'll let you take over.
So I really want people to see this. It's a mural. I'm going to talk about the mural and then I'm going to go back to the beginning. So this is a mural created by Desimundo of, what is his organization called? Community Rejuvenation Project. They work in the East Bay predominantly. However, he gets commissioned all over the place. And two of my narrators from the California BIPOC Liberation Stories Project that Policy Link, a National Policy Institute, commissioned me to do across almost a whole year. This is one of the resulting amplifications. And if anybody's in Oakland, please go by 7th and Webster. It's in Oakland's Chinatown. The two narrators who are amplified, and if you can, I don't know how, but like just take a look at the letters. They spell out legacy. And you'll see, I mean, there's several faces that you see, but you'll see if you knew the two people, two of the narrators who contributed their recordings, their oral histories to the project. Roy Chan, who is an oral historian, typically I love that part. Typically oral historians are not narrators. And he was like, wait a minute, you want to include, like, I'm like, yeah. And then also Flo Oy, an elder. I'm going to scroll back and say how this started, what the change was, how my Capricorn behind envisioned it, and how it went a different direction, and the ways that I had to iterate, and how I changed through it. I believe how the vice president of Policy Link changed a little bit as well. How some of the narrators changed, and then you can let me know if I haven't hit anything else that you wondered about. So Venice Dunn is the vice president of communications for PolicyLink. And she emails me, I'm in Oaxaca having a really good time in residence at a place called Poco a Poco. And she's like, you know what would you do if you had XYZ amount of money? Could you talk to me really quickly? And I'm thinking I'm going to help her. You know what I mean? Like she's asking for some advice. And I tell her like, okay, it would be an oral history project. I'd have this many narrators. Typically, these are the people who I collaborate with. I always start with seed interviews. That gives me an opportunity, like from a small, like core set to test out questions, to see how the flow is across the questions. And then like more times than not, the narrators function as matchmakers and it's a web and they tell me who else I should be talking to. And so I was like, I do that. It'd take about this amount of time. And, I was like, depending on who the narrators are, I'm like, gosh, like this person, this person, this one, these are icons. And I normally do not archive anything. I don't believe in archives. So you see, this is clearly going to turn around. I'm like, I don't believe in archives. They just like function and save relics and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, these are the typical collaborators, cultural workers who I collaborate with. And I was like, so you're probably talking about murals, like maybe a DJ, blah, blah, blah. And so she was like, wow, done. Okay. So do you need me to drop the contract or would you, or like, and I'm like, I thought I was just giving some advice. I didn't know that you were like hiring me for something. So I get this commission, big commission. And with a good, like, I always want to say, and elevate and uplift Venice, because and I think this is worthy of saying, I have found it to be the case with BIPOC women in leadership roles who believe, like they've already done their due diligence. She had followed my work for several years and she believes in the way I do the work. She believes in the work. She believes that it could meet the challenge that she outlined, that the world didn't need another white paper. It'd be great if there was a project that had some legs on it. And if policymakers sat down at a table with other organizers and you could hit press play, right? And listen to stories instead of reading a report, a dry, dusty report. I know reports have their place, but do we need another one all the time? Probably not. And so she was like, so if we could just center the meetings starting there of stories where different communities actually worked together and there were positive outcomes and bridges were actually made instead of things blowing up left and right, where relationships were nurtured across time, sparked during critical crises, chaotic moments. Wow, that would be a real powerful way to start meetings, conferences, congresses, et cetera. And I was like, cool, I'm on it. So drop the contract. I do the seed interviews. I'm like, it's got to be in an archive because these are icons. Some of these people are civil rights, like straight up icons. I'm like, oh man, why do I promise stuff? 3 out of the first 5 of those seed interviews, they're like, oh, you know what? We don't know this policy institution, but now we know you and we trust you and we really like this interview. That was cool. And so you don't have my permission to archive this recording, not in a state repository, not a federal. And I'm like, wait, you've already signed the release form. Like technically I could, but I always follow my narrator's lead. So I'm like, I can't even attempt to try to coerce people to do like, no, I would not have the career I have if that's how I got down. So I was like, okay, give me a second. Like I'm going to follow that and I'm going to get back to you. And so immediately I'm like, I need to email Amy, who Fanny knows, Dr. Amy Starcheski. I'm like, Amy, I need you to give me the BIPOC archiving guide because I need to give that to my narrators so then they can tell me where they want these stories to be archived. And she was like, girl, I don't know what you're talking, like that doesn't exist. So you're going to have to make it because it appeared for you as a need, you need to make it. And I'm like, Amy, I'm in the middle of a project, like, help me. That's what I need. And she's like, what do you want me? I didn't promise that. What are you talking about? So Amy being amazing and great, we hang for maybe an hour. And by the end of that advising Zoom phone call, no, it must have been a Zoom. I'm like, you know what, Amy? Okay, if I was going to take this on, it would be after this project. Somehow I pull a rabbit out of my butt and I figured this out. I was like, it'll be after that. Every project begins with research. Let me think about how, like, what would I do to start the research? And I was like, wait a minute. When I'm thinking about icons, visionaries, even prophets, BIPOC, who has made an interesting choice around archive? And I was like, Octavia E. Butler. She was known to be so highly introverted. I find it curious that she archived, I can tell you, I've read them, almost all, her personal journals from the ages of 5, 6 years old, almost to her death. And so I'm just like, that's a curious choice. I don't really quite understand that because I've already told my kids, burn it all. Do not let anybody. I'm like, keep the oral histories, but no, I don't want to open mic after I die. I don't want, like, just no. And so I was like, I think I would start with Octavia. And she was like, cool, I'll nominate you for the fellowship. Like, done, get it done. So that's how I wound up here. And that's just like a, like put a pin in that because I still had the project to get through, right? And so I go back to Venice and I'm like, sorry, I promised this thing, it's in our contract. I can tell you now that if these three said no, it's a no.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I mean, what I would usually do is this, and this. I would have a mural in a very public place or a community space that's very significant to the people, the narrators, right? And I was like, okay, archives are a no. Maybe public libraries. I wonder if they would feel good instead of it being treated like a relic in a repository. What would happen if I said, but at your local public library, the project is accessible? All three of them, they were like, of course, because library is the place where like you take your grandkids or like, you know what I mean? You go and get books, digital, like whatever. And so I just was like, okay, how would I push the stories out? And I was like, okay, easy peasy, Spotify. I'll get them professionally edited. And I was like, well, that's not actually like tying to perhaps as many people as it could be. And then I was like, wait a minute, I know somebody at PBS. So then that's how I got the listening guide and the teaching notes pushed out to all of the PBS affiliate stations. And I was like, all right, is there anything else that's left remaining? I was like, a poster. We need an actual image that helps resonate. And so we just took a beautiful quotation, tiny one, with the QR code from Spotify. I hired a Bay Area BIPOC-based cultural worker, graphic designer, like just 360. I wanted everybody who touched it to be from the communities that were going to have the stories returned back to them. So that's how that whole project evolved, came about. I would say from the narrator's perspective, the change. So let me talk through the change. The change that happened, actually let's start back with Denise. We did an open studios conversation, which was like, I think if there wasn't the trust between the two of us to begin with, maybe it wouldn't have happened. But I said, look, I made this mistake. Here's how I'm going to iterate. I think we should do an open studio conversation, have it recorded, and send it out to potential narrators, potential matchmakers, and anybody else who might touch this project, including all of the public librarians, et cetera, et cetera. And she was like, well, what do you mean? Tell me more. And I said, you know, I'm going to devise some story prompt questions. We're going to talk through why you chose me, what this project should be. You get an opportunity to discuss some things with me. And I said, but more to the point, let's just pull the veil completely back so that people understand who I am, my disposition, my values, ethics, etc., and who you are too as the person writing the check. That typically, that last part, that doesn't happen. And I could see, if you're not, actually, I have this pro surfer friend who says, posers be posing. I guess you can't pose in the waves. I don't know. But the point is, I'm like, oh, if you are a funder and you actually aren't about the work, that might be a tricky, you know what I mean? A tricky thing to consent to.
Right.
And
I
so,
really, I really love, Mi'Jan, your ability to adapt, to respond to the narrator's needs, your own needs as an oral historian, because we all know that we work on multiple projects all the time as historians and cultural workers, and adapting to the funders as well, or more so that you were um, informing them of their need to adapt. Is that correct?
I mean, everybody had to adapt.
Yes. Yeah.
Every last person in the project. Yes, that is correct. Mhm.
I really appreciate that, Mi'Jan. And I want to get to the next question because you have another slide which shows us events that took place in Detroit and Oaxaca in which you generated civic engagement
Mhm.
through oral history and storytelling. So tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about that.
It's called Story Feast, just because that's what it is. There's a physical feast of food, and also we're feasting on each other's stories. It's the only culinary narrative work that I do outside of writing. And it started in Detroit. Where is that photo on the right-hand bottom side where you see just me? I didn't want to deal with release forms and all of that kind of stuff. So long and short, there's a neighborhood in Detroit where there's so many different kinds of people all together in this neighborhood. A significant Middle Eastern population. There's this art house called Burnside, which is also an urban farm. And then you have folks who have lived there across generations. And one thing that I was asked, typical, if there's a residency and they also are giving money, they'll say like, can you do an artist talk or a workshop or something? And I was like, nope. No, that's boring. I don't want to do it. And they were like, okay, what would you like to do? And I said, you know what? Tell me about the neighborhood and the neighbors. When do you all get together? What would be significant that is positive? That could be a contribution. However, it's not about me. It would be about the people, blah, 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 without asking or requiring them to have some labor involved. And so that's when I just came up with this idea. I was like, what would happen if we invite the neighbors together to sit down in this art farmhouse, and share stories across 3 different courses. When we think about civic engagement and people are talking about voting or registering to vote, all that kind of stuff, I'm like, yes, that's one aspect of civic engagement that is important, I believe. However, before you even get to that, do you know the people who you live with? Do you know your postal person delivering your mail? Do you like, especially 2025? I think about here at Huntington. I live in one of the researcher houses in the neighborhood, and I'm like, wow, I wonder when the last time was that these people had a block party. You know what I mean? I'm like, do you know who, like, for real? Do you know who lives 5 doors from you? This is weird. Y'all don't really know each other. You don't have a culture of speaking to each other, even on the street. I mean, the dog walkers they're holding it down, but everybody else, no. So when I look at Story Feast, it's like, here's another example of, can we build trusting relationships? Not like I'm the architect through these narratives across time, but can I spark it? Can I create a container where people will let go a little bit, let their guard down a little bit, share a story a little bit, eat some food. I always have a DJ or live musicians. In Detroit, we had a drummer. And it's like, you're feeling good. There's no beef. You're a little bit curious. You came with an empty belly and hopefully enough empty space in your mind and your heart to trade stories with the people who you live and work with in your neighborhood. That's how I come to my social practice art, if we were going to use a term, fine. Civic engagement, if we're going to use that term too. Yeah, together.
Yeah,
And
the important, go
I
ahead.
just realized somebody's asking, oh yeah, in San Marino, yes.
The importance of getting to know who lives next to you, who is in your neighborhood, matters just as much as what you're going to vote for come primary time, right? I
Your
appreciate.
local elections too, all of that. I'm like, why would you show up in
Mhm.
any way, shape, or form to contribute time, energy, money to a local election, and you don't even know who the heck is living all around you?
Mhm.
That seems wild.
Right. So Mi'Jan, my last question is about your experience in Octavia E. Butler's archives. You've mentioned her and
Yes.
called her spirit into the spaces that we're in. Tell us what you found and what we can learn from her.
Um, I still have to meet, even though I've been here off and on, maybe 4 or 5 months, yeah, total in the last year and a half. I think that's about right. I still don't even know what all I can say because it's her intellectual property, and I respect that when people are alive, and I respect that when they're ancestors. So what I can tell you is based on her public works and the fact that we do know her and understand her to be one of the, yeah, first Black literary arts, Afrofuturist pioneers. Front and center, I read her archives around the theme of what is possible. I have never, ever, except for my dad, I've never, um, I've never gotten such a inner world view of commitment to one's practice, like unwavering. She started her days at 2 in the morning and would write into, I mean, these are talking about the first 5 years in the 70s, when she had to work, blue collar kind of jobs for the most part. She didn't drive, so she's on public transportation in LA, which I can't even imagine like before the metro train. But the point is that she did that for 5 years straight across 100% rejections, which is weird and wild to consider, like such a prolific, acclaimed writer and a MacArthur genius. 5 years, consistent rejections. I learned tenacity from her. I learned commitment to one's practice from her. I learned I learned generosity, if I'm being honest, because I think if I consider myself an extroverted introvert. And I'm like, however, she was like super duper, super introverted, very shy. And I'm like, wow, she left hundreds of boxes in an archive to be researched by scholars and curators, like well beyond decades after she passed. And the way that she chose the institution, I think, especially in a year like 2025, when we see all of these federal cuts to funding that do not touch her materials, I'm like, I, I, I'm just deeply on board with understanding futurist more, paying more attention now, like, because I
Mhm.
think to myself, what if there's some clue or some puzzle piece to a solution in the future that is going to be in some way, shape, or form reliant on something that some of our elders understand and young people understand right now? if those stories are not saved, as much as I would talk about, oh, archives and relics, now I'm a true believer because I'm like, thank God. She's helping me to, yeah, to create guidance for all of these glam institutions, but more importantly for our icons, our elders, and our soon-to-be ancestors. People think I'm doom and gloom when I say, you know, our civil rights era leaders, I think will all have passed in the next decade, just by math. You know what I mean? Just like, I'm not being like weird about it. I'm just doing math. Like BIPOC people pass earlier too. So I'm like, now is a really strong time to get the guidance to them to say, do you want to archive your work? Do you want to archive your legacy materials digitally or privately or in a public institution? And do you understand how to make sure that, as Carla, the head curator over Octavia's archive, she says, no pet projects. No pet projects, because pet projects can be defunded the minute that that curator or that archivist leaves. No pet projects. So that's what I got to say.
I love it. Thank you so much. I could listen to you speak for a really long time, and I look forward to you developing an Octavia E. Butler retreat by Mi'Jan Celie Tho-Biaz. I know lots of people have questions in the chat, so I'll pass it over to Ella to guide us through that process. But thank you so much, Mi'Jan. This has been a pleasure and a true honor.
Oh, thank you, Fanny. Thank you for the invite. Thanks for folks who have, yeah, joined us today. I'm ready to hear.
All right. Hi, everybody. Wow, Mi'Jan and Fanny, that was such a great conversation. I too was like, just like time was just flying by because I was so into what you all were saying. Thank you. You were talking about Octavia's generosity. Mi'Jan, thank you for your generosity in being here and sharing all your thoughts and reflections. It means a lot to all of us here listening. Yeah, we want to hear from folks if people have questions for Mi'Jan or also Fanny as well about storytelling, about being an interviewer, about oral history, about public art and this relationship. What are some questions people are having? Feel free to drop it in the chat.
And even or not tangible, but more material questions around like fellowships, residencies, like way of resourcing our work. It's all, yeah, I'm game for it all.
Maybe we could start there while people are thinking of a question, Mi'Jan. I know, do you have any advice for people who are memory workers or historians who are trying to seek funding for their work right now, given the kind of, I think we can all agree, chaotic landscape of funding? What advice do you have for people?
I think, you know, first off, I want to back up. Sometimes people think, oh, if there's chaos, it doesn't touch me. I don't know why people have that thought. I had about 70% of my work drop out that first week of February. Very shaky. Thankfully, or maybe not thankfully isn't the right word, but I've lived through ups and downs, right, across my career and life. And so I just was like, what are some of the very first steps that I need to take before I begin replacing this work, which I have, thank God. The last 2.5 months were really go, 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 go. However, one smart thing that I was given as advice, go back to the people who've already funded you. That can be your fellowships. That can be residency directors, partners. Basically, begin to ask questions around, you know, what work do you think, given this context and landscape, what work do you think that I do can be funded this year? What are you seeing that's top of mind, that's an even more timely need? What communities, if it's going to be a new to me community, might I want to bridge towards? What collaborations? Like I'm so excited. Well, I'm not going to say it. My point is, even to go back to maybe something got paused a year, 2, 3 years ago, this might be the time for that to rekindle. You know what I mean? And also, of course, look at the private institutions and private funders who are not closely reliant on federal funding. That's some of my biggest advice. Like, federal funding, if it already hasn't experienced some challenges, who knows in the next 3.5 years where things will land. So my heart goes out to folks who may be starting projects and then the funding drops in a few days, weeks, months, and they have to try to figure it out. It's like, just in this moment, I would encourage people, commissions, research endeavors, and then self-design projects. Who is a private entity, or what are private entities that might be a more aligned supporter who can ride through the evolution and completion of the work?
Thanks, Mi'Jan. I think that's really, really valuable advice. I want to move on to a few people are asking kind of more, like mechanics and getting specific. Someone asked about how you think about caring for folks after they share their stories, given that people that process can be tender or traumatic. This is Grace's question. How do you care for folks after they share?
I see it as shared care, because sometimes I've even been tripped up and I'm like, let me also and I try to prime before the interview and say, like, look, I'm also a human. You might, I don't remember the elder oral historian, like an auntie at UNLV, Black woman. Was she doing a showgirl oral history? Somebody, if you know who I'm talking about, drop that in the chat. However, I will never forget, it was a SOHA, so Southwest Oral History Association conference many, many years ago. And she was like, it's okay to cry. You are human. You might need care. You know what I'm saying? So let's back up first. Again, we're not working in a hierarchical way. It's okay to laugh as long as it's not, in an inappropriate moment. So I like to back up, and just as, like, not quite group agreements, but to share the landscape of how the interview process might be for both of us, and be like, this is what you can count on me for, this, and this, before we hit the stage or before I hit record. I mean, and now you all see this. Fanny, she was at OHA, a practice that I did before we started recording. I do a sensory, 5 senses, right? A sensory meditation that helps me connect to the moment before I assume the responsibility of stewarding the oral history recording or the oral history conversation on stage. And so I ask the people, either if it's in a keynote or whatever, it's like, I invite them in, will you join me in this? I'm doing it for myself. I'm doing it for the nervous systems of everybody else. I'm also doing it with the person who is going to be generous and share their story. So that's another thing, before we even get to what they might share, that I might need to hold in a kind, compassionate, and caring way. I tell people ahead of time, here's what I'm going to do afterwards. Hopefully, the people who have invited us in, if it's an on-stage kind of thing, we're going to share a meal. There are cultural protocols if I'm in an indigenous community or I'm on tribal land that I'm going to have to honor and respect and follow. So it's not about, like, how I'm going to care. And they've helped me understand, again, that notion of, it's not up to just me. There's a whole community who's supposed to be caring for and with each other. And then the last thing that I'll say is, or I'll ask, are you okay with hugging? We can stop in the middle of an interview and, share a hug, or afterwards, maybe we're joyful. It's okay to be joyful. Let me know where you are in your healing journey. A lot of times people have told me before an interview or during an interview, I'm in therapy about X. I will still answer this question, but it's informing to me, like, this is going to be it could be a hot button kind of question. And so I'll say, hey, do you want me to stop, like pause the recording at that time? Totally fine. And I want people to know afterwards, and in perpetuity, if you need this to be erased, No problem. No problem. Why? Because their well-being, my well-being, and our relationship and my relationship to people who I'll work with in the future at large, that's all more important. And that's part of our ethics as oral historians for social change. It's not like stuff that I've come up with.
That's really, really meaningful, and just like the sweetness there, Mijan, especially that asking people it's okay to hug. I feel like I haven't heard people say that before, and it makes so much sense. We're just about out of time, and so I just want to acknowledge that people had some questions about, what the specifics of hosting the story feast and as well as creating the murals. So maybe in our follow-up email, we'll send that to people. We might be able to share a couple more details, or letting people find a way to learn more about those. But I just want to say thank you so much to Mijan for this conversation. It's been really beautiful and I think heartening for all of us right now, whether we're new to this work or have been involved in it for some time, to be able to hear your perspectives. And thank you, Fanny, for leading this beautiful conversation. I just want to do a couple housekeeping things as we're closing out. As we were saying, I think it sounds like people have a lot of different questions still for me, John. So folks can connect to her through her website. I believe a link is being shared potentially in the chat. Okay, great. Of how to stay in touch and go to her office, her unoffice hours, pardon me, as well as connecting on LinkedIn. I also want to encourage folks, if you enjoyed this conversation, to please join us for our next two oral history and practice conversations that Voice of Witness is going to be hosting. One is going to be about participatory storytelling exhibits, another about documenting refugee stories. And this series is really a way for us to have conversations like this with people who are in the community, who are practitioners, and learn more about how they approach their projects. And there's so many benefits of oral history, and there's so many different ways to approach it. So it's a way to see oral history in action. We also encourage people to attend our upcoming summer workshop series, where we give an overview about thinking about how to design your own project, how to think about interviewing and editing and honoring your narrator's voice. So stay tuned for those dates. They should probably be around August, but if you stay connected to us in Voice of Witness, either online or through our newsletter, you can find out more about us, or about when those workshops will be. And again, please partner with us. You reach out to us, explore those different trainings and services we do. We want to hear from you. You can go to our website and download a lot of different resources. We hope that this session offered some different insights and inspiration for your own work. We want to acknowledge that VOW, like other nonprofits right now, is reliant on donations and event tickets. So
Please,
you are
please.
able to, please consider making a donation today. Like a lot of folks, we're navigating a challenging financial future as an organization. So the support of our community means a lot to us, just so that we can keep doing our storytelling projects and resources and having spaces like this for learning and connection. So if you are able to contribute, we really appreciate it. And so that means a lot to us. But even so, even if you're not able to, please continue to stay in touch with us, follow us on social media, reach out with any questions. My email is there. This has been a great conversation. Thank you to everyone here for taking the time to be part of it today, and for listening, and for your great comments and questions. And just a final great thank you to Mijan for this great conversation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Mijan.
Thank you, Fanny. Thank you, Ella. My pleasure.
Have a great afternoon/evening, everybody. Take care of yourselves.